Okay, all right. Hi, everyone. I know we're all kind of connecting to audio still. Okay, so it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Liberal Arts Career Community Panel. I'm Kristen Kaz, and I am a professor in the English division at PCC, and I also am the Career Community Lead for Liberal Arts. So that is why I'm facilitating this panel today. And let's go ahead and get started with an introduction from our panelists. So Lindsay, you want to start us off with an intro?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Ruiz. I go by she, her pronouns, and I teach English and ESL. And so, a lot of what we do is, critical thinking, discussions about social justice. And yeah, so it's a big part of what we do in my English and ESL classes.
Thank you. Beth, let's hear from you.
Hi, my name is Beth Williams. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a faculty member in the English department as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And Albert, let's get an intro from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Albert Shen. I'm with the philosophy department here. I'm excited to have this conversation with everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you all, panelists, for being here. And thank you all, our wonderful attendees, for showing up. It's nice to see you. I know this is weird. It's sort of a surreal situation to be in, that we'd be sitting here on the computer like this, but it's pretty cool. So I'm going to be moderating the conversation. If you have any questions that you'd like our panelists to answer, please feel free to write them in the chat. If you have any comments or feedback, that'd be great too. I've got a list of questions that I'll be working through with the panelists, and then I'll be monitoring the waiting room, so I'll be letting folks in. And at the end, we'll send you a little link for a survey you can take, and I think that's it. So we'll get started. Let's go ahead and get our first question. So you've introduced yourselves with your role on campus, so we kind of know what your career is. So would you spend a little time telling us all what your career path looked like, and maybe what made you gravitate toward the career that you have right now? So Lindsay, you started us off with intros. Why don't you start us off with this question?
Oh, absolutely. So I think back to college, my own, process of making decisions about what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And it was hard. I mean, I entered college as undecided. I did not know what I wanted to do. And both of my parents were in education. And I saw how hard they worked. And I saw, my mother grading papers all weekend, all night. And I thought, nope, I'm not doing that. And then I just found myself here. It came naturally as I took classes, as I found where my passions lay. And I found that I enjoyed being able to express myself and persuade others. And so I recognize the importance of language, especially in our current situation, our current world, where we're, a lot of the impact that we have on our surroundings, on our families, on our friends, has to do with our language. So potent, so powerful. So anyway, I found what I loved, and then I ended up just kind of following my path. I went from, I got my degree in English. I did minor in Spanish, and I studied abroad in Spain, and that was a phenomenal experience, which I encourage anybody to do, just to get a broader world perspective. And then after that, I thought, what do I want to do? And then I went back to school, more education. So I got my master's degree, and of course in English, and people would say, well, what do you want to do with that English degree? And it was like, well, you can teach or you can be a lawyer. And that's what I was told. Like, you can teach or you can, pursue your law degree. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, but what I realized was we don't even know what's out there. Those are not the only options. There are so many options about so many different careers that don't even exist right now, right? And you might even help to develop. So I think that I just realized the importance of this kind of work, of this reflection, critical thinking, discourse with our larger community. And it's so critical, especially today where we need to communicate. And so I stumbled into it and I love it. I do. I mean, despite all the grading, and I am grading all the time. But, you know, when you're making a difference, when you feel like you have a purpose, then it makes it worth it.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Beth, how about you?
So yeah, my career path, I started at community college after high school. I'm from Northern California, and I started at De Anza Community College in Cupertino. And I was really pretty sure at the time that I wanted to do something with international relations. And so my major was political science. But the seed got planted for me to go into English while I was at community college, because all the classes I liked best were my English classes there. And one thing I'll just mention is I was really like on a mission to get done with community college and transfer as fast as I could. And so I actually realized while I was there that I was more interested in English, but I didn't change my major. I didn't want to slow down my path. And so it was sort of like not really keeping my eye in a sense on like my bigger picture. It was just kind of short, like I want to transfer as fast as possible. So one like thing I would probably do differently is have changed to being an English major in undergrad, but I did stay in political science and I transferred to UC Berkeley. And it was while I was there that since I was enjoying writing so much and English so much, even though I was a political science major still, I started tutoring in the Student Learning Center on campus, tutoring writing classes. And I got very involved in that. And I got to know some of the English teachers who taught in the composition program at Berkeley. And they recommended going to this particular composition master's program at SF State, which was where a lot of them had gone. And so that informed, my path to then go get my master's in English composition. And it was actually the tutoring that I was doing at UC Berkeley got me involved in a program that Berkeley offered, which some of you may have heard of because they have them at many schools. It's called Bridge, and it's a bridge program for students who have just been admitted from high school into college, and it's to help them bridge sort of that gap. And many of the students are first in their family to go to college and or low income. And so I started immediately teaching, first as a TA, a teaching assistant, and then teaching my own classes during summer bridge. And that really kept me, I loved the program. I loved getting to work with these driven, excited new college students. And that is what kept me really excited about the career. And I've continued to teach. I taught for mainly around the Bay Area as a part-time instructor, and I also was doing academic advising. And so my path has kind of been alternating between teaching and academic advising. So really, invested in college students and that atmosphere, but sort of wanting to do both sides of the, working with the students. So eventually I sort of decided that I had the most fun connecting with students through teaching my own classes, and that teaching also allowed me to do some informal advising when I connected with students. And so that's sort of how I wound up coming down to PCC.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And Albert, let's hear from you.
I think my interest in the career path that I took started fairly early. So my dad is a pastor, which means I was traumatized in a lot of ways as a kid. But I had a lot of arguments with him about God and, what the nature of humanity looks like. And, those debates, I think, sparked a certain kind of interest. And so when I got to college and I took my first philosophy class, I was hooked. It was right when Matrix was coming out, and the class I was taking was Descartes, talking about, I don't know if the world actually exists. And that just blew my mind. And then after that point, I just couldn't get away. I enjoyed reading philosophy, thinking about it, mostly thinking, not so much the reading, and having conversations with colleagues. And so, I I think instantly I was thinking I wanted to just do this for the rest of my life. But it was a longer path in part because my faculty mentor in college uh, said, you know, being a professor is not what you think it is. It's a really difficult route to go. There are very few jobs that are available, at least in philosophy. So if you could find anything else that'll make you happy, do that instead. And then so I tried. I went out and got a job. I went to theology school, wondering if maybe I could work out some personal issues there. But I think at the end of the day, I realized this is really what I wanted to do. So I just gung-ho worked to try to go ahead and make it down this path. But it was a long, difficult one, you know. The PhD program at UC Santa Barbara made me want to quit this career path. That was very, very difficult. And then I was at a temporary stint out in Pennsylvania, teaching out there. And I think it was there that I realized that my real passion was for teaching philosophy more than like researching. So, you know, when the PCC job came up, I thought that this would be a really good fit. So I was excited to be able to come here and to be able to teach this particular student body, the community college population. It's actually where my personal passion is rooted in. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Albert. And if you don't mind, I'd love to just share a teensy bit about my own experience becoming a professor. Because the last time I took a tally of how many jobs I've had in my life, I think the number was around 25. So I've done a lot of things, and I did not always want to be in the education field. I always wanted to be a baker and a pastry chef. So my mom is a retired school teacher, and when I told her I wanted to go to culinary school, she was like, girl, please get something to fall back on because you don't know what that career will be like. And bless her for not telling me every day that she told me so, because here I am in education. But I actually went and got a degree in English for undergrad because I liked reading. And I was like, well, if I can get a degree and spend all my time reading books, awesome, that's what I'm going to do. And while I was in college, I started to work for a bakery. So I kind of made both things happen at once. I worked as a baker for a while. I realized my brain wasn't being stimulated the way that I wanted it to be. So I wound up doing a bunch of different things. I worked in post-production for a while, helping to like do editing more on the writer's side. So I worked a lot with commercial production and advertising. I did some copywriting for media and advertising. I also worked with, I was a professional editor. Like when I started grad school, I realized, you know, I was going to be a teaching associate. I was going to teach a little bit, but I wasn't going to make much money. So I started doing professional editing. So I worked as an academic editor. I worked as an editor for a literary magazine, actually like piecing together work. I also got into designing for publications. So I worked with a couple different lit mags to put together the actual publications, working with different design tools and like InDesign, for instance, if there are any like graphic designers or folks who have done like book creation before, InDesign is a pretty cool tool to use. So I tried to like really diversify myself and explore different opportunities, but when it all comes down to it, being a professor at a community college is probably the most fulfilling role I've ever played, just because you get so much interaction with people at such a poignant moment in their lives that it's really an awesome experience. So I don't want to pigeonhole myself and say like, oh, you should teach if you have an English degree, but it is a very fulfilling role to play. So, okay, thank you for letting me do that. I know I said I was just going to moderate, but I appreciate you giving me a little time. So let's hop to one of the questions about like who helped you along the way. And then I'd like to combine that also with what sort of advice you might give someone who is interested in like working along a similar career path. So Beth, why don't we start with you? Okay. And then we'll go on to Albert and then Lindsay.
So who helped along the way? I would say that the connections that I made with with instructors was, certain instructors that I just really felt sort of a connection to were very helpful to me. And also the first kind of job that I mentioned I had when I transferred to Berkeley was a writing coordinator, the coordinator of the writing program for the tutoring program on campus. And I became friends with her, and she was my supervisor. And then I got the opportunity with Summer Bridge to be her teaching assistant a few years. And, I now co-teach with her a program at UC Berkeley every summer that's for transfer students transitioning into UC Berkeley. And so that, relationship started with her right when I transferred in 2005. And it's like kind of evolved because she had a similar, career path and interest. And then I would also just say for me, since I did end up going into teaching in English, I became, fairly close with a couple of my instructors at De Anza, the community college that I was at. And, I took multiple classes from one professor in particular. And he really, I still actually saved his syllabi from when he was my teacher. He taught me 3 English classes. And, I think about how creative his book selection was and things like that. And that just really still continues to inspire me in my own teaching. And yeah, so I'd say those are kind of the most significant helping roles. What was the other part of that question?
What advice would you offer people? So bearing in mind sort of the mentorship that you received and the advice that those people would have given you, what kind of advice would you give someone, a student, for instance, who's maybe interested in pursuing a similar path?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think that based on my experience, making some connection, if you notice that there are professors or people that you encounter at a student support, kind of in a student support role or center on campus or something, if somebody like that kind of stands out, you sort of feel like you click with them, you have something that you're sort of drawn to them in some sense, I think recommend taking the leap, even though it can be nervous or nerve-wracking, and asking if you can chat with them about their career path, or sort of do an informal conversation interview with them. I think that it can feel really nerve-wracking to talk to professors or people in supervisor roles, especially when you're still a student. But I think that taking that extra push to, talk to them, even if it's uncomfortable or nerve-wracking to you, can really end up being, in the long term, one of the most meaningful, relationships that you can form, and that can really impact your trajectory in your career.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. So Albert, let's hear from you, kind of who helped you along the way, and then what sort of advice you would offer folks who are interested in a similar path.
Yeah, so I did already mention I had a faculty mentor, well, informal, who, basically warned me, unless you want to be severely depressed all the time, don't go into academia. And as much as I was in defiance at that time, I think it was sound advice, which is that this is actually a very difficult route to go. And I think it forced me to consider what it is that I really wanted out of my work life, whether it was meaning that I wanted or a certain kind of work that I wanted. It forced me to explore other avenues before really settling on it. And I think a lot of the people that helped me outside of that along the way really were not in academia, to be honest. They were people, former supervisors from work, who would write a letter of recommendation on my behalf about my character, more so than my teaching abilities, let's say. And that did wonders for me in opening doors. I can't count all the different people that have kind of supported me along the way, but a lot of it was emotional support. A lot of it, because this is a very difficult route to go. And finding a job in academia is not always the easiest, at least for philosophy anyways. I'm not sure about all the other fields. And so, you know, I needed a lot of people to continue encouraging me through the very, very long process. I mean, we're talking, for me, it was like 10, 12 years of school after college. So it was a lot of schooling. Yeah. And if there was any advice that I would give, it's one that I heard, I think, when I first entered college, which is that your major honestly doesn't matter. You know, I use my spouse, my partner, as a good example. You know, she went to art school, did like 3D designing or something, and then went into production instead. And then now complete career change, decided to go into psychology. And none of that effort and time were wasted. It was just the path that she took, and each moment she gained something from it. And I think, you know, I just happen to be one of those people who just had a one-track mind, but, you know, I think it's important to realize that what matters is the degree that you get and the skill sets you develop and the connections and the people that you meet along the way. And then, you know, I think Lindsay mentioned it, like, you have no idea what jobs are going to be available in the future. And I think that's what you're seeing now. A lot of jobs that used to be considered very secure, maybe like 15, 20 years ago, it's just not available now. Those jobs have closed up. Things are moving in a different direction. And so, yeah, just keep an open mind.
Thanks, Albert. All right, Lindsay, would you mind please telling us a little bit about some of the mentorship you may have received, and then, same as our other two panelists, what advice you might offer?
I'm glad I went last because there's so much important, like what Beth said about making connections. Just like Beth, I still to this day have relationships with my professors from grad school, from high school even. And, you know, those relationships make a difference and have made a difference. And so, you know, when you click, when you find somebody who inspires you, I think it's important to recognize that. Connections are important. You know, we know that that's just kind of when you're competing for a job, it helps to have support. And so finding the support where you can. I had a lot of support from instructors. I told you my parents were both in education. And so I had a lot of support. In fact, when I was a child, I would not call it support. I would call it torture because, you know, it was, they kind of pounded into me this idea of, you know, perpetual learning. And I think that that's the one thing I've always taken from my education is that I never know enough, ever. I think that, you know, I've gotten my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and I am in process of researching and taking the next step. I'm going to commit to the next step. I'm going to get my PhD, and I want to, and now I know what I want to do with that work. And for me, that is, you know, looking at structures of you know, racism in education, and looking at it from a structural perspective, and using my education, my expertise, my experience to make changes, to actually make changes. And so I think that in order to get to the place that I was now, I had a lot of support. I had financial support from my parents, from the government. I think all of this is really important in figuring out, you know, what we as a community need to help our students succeed. I was also very privileged. You know, I actually went to a private high school that was geared towards college prep. And so, you know, I recognize, you know, the fact that I was helped quite significantly along the way. And so I want to use, you know, the space that I take up now to address those issues. And that's why I'm at a community college. I think it's so important to, you know, to be a part of this change, and to be a lifelong learner, to read, to professionally develop, to get certificates, to recognize our privilege and the systems. And to vote. You know, part of this is also being, you know, good citizens in terms of voting. That affects PCC and the community. So anyway, I think I'm getting kind of off topic, but, you know, what support did I have? I had a lot of support. And so being able to recognize that and then try to, you know, perpetuate that into the future. So for those of you who are, you know, looking for that support, it's everywhere at PCC. You know, we are here. There are lots of professors, lots of counselors, you know, coaches, administrators, staff. I mean, everybody here, you know, we all want you to succeed. And so that's, I think, take advantage of that, I think is what Beth was saying too. You know, don't be afraid. You know, reach out, have conversations, meaningful conversations, because, you know, we're here because we want to give back, we want to help. And like I said, continue to grow and do better.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I really appreciate that all three of you, Beth, Albert, Lindsay, you all really emphasized the importance of finding support. So for those of us who maybe didn't have the financial support or the emotional support from our families, being able to really find like a faculty member or just someone who's on campus who, even if they're not in the field you want to pursue, who can be that support for you and like push you forward. When I went back to graduate school, like my parents went to college, but they went because not because they had like an internal motivation to do so. It's sort of like, you know, my dad was back from the Navy, and so he's like, well, I guess this is what I'll do. And then my mom wanted to be a teacher, so they had ideas and they supported me, but they had no idea what grad school would be like. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. So I really turned back to like a lot of the professors I had known during undergrad to say like, is this something I should do? Like, should I pursue this? And I got resounding yeses from people because they could see I was interested and they were there for me the entire time that I was pursuing my master's. I will say, like, even the night before school started, I was like, oh, look, that bakery I used to work for is hiring again. Maybe I should just go back, because it's scary in the absence of like legitimate support. So finding people who you can like build that network with is really important. And like Lindsay said, and Beth said, and Albert said, the professors at PCC, we're here for you. I mean, you know, right now we're here in Zoom for you, but one day we'll be back in our offices waiting for you. But Lindsay, you started to touch on some of the ideas related to social justice. And that's why we're here today, really, to talk about how roles in liberal arts relate to social justice and what a career as an educator in English, in philosophy, what that means if you're interested in pursuing social justice, as we all are. That's why we're here. So Albert, would you mind spending a little bit of time telling us what social justice means to you and how you see your career working alongside that idea of what social justice is, and then maybe like some specific things that you do that you feel really help you to move forward and pursue social justice and actually enact it.
All right. Actually, I don't know if it'll be okay, but I think I also wanted to answer this in conjunction with another question, which
Of
is
course,
what is something
you do
different
you,
or
Albert.
unique that I bring into philosophy specifically as a field. And I think it might be a better place to begin because for me, justice is an abstract concept that, you know, if it were to be lived out, you would see, you know, less suffering. You would see people more united, helping each other. I mean, I'm an ethicist, so this is all I think about all day. But one of the things I recognized once I got into philosophy is that it is a very white male dominated field, very Western heavy influence. You know, the people in positions of power within my field just all more or less looked very similar to each other. This is not to say that there wasn't some diversity, but it was a major, something that a lot of students, I think, recognized themselves when they took a philosophy class. Like, one of the things they noticed right away is like, oh, there's very few women here. There's very few non-white. And if you actually find out about their background, a lot of them come from well-off families, right? Upper middle class families that have the resources to kind of give them the kind of education to allow them to succeed in this sort of field. So, for me, when I think about, you know, what social justice means, and in really shaking up the systems that kind of put people in these positions, both of power and oppression, um, I look at my own field and I look at the history and I think about how is it that we got here? And I'm actually really grateful that even though this has been an issue for a really long time, I remember it was 3-4 years ago, I was at a conference in Baltimore. It was a philosophy conference and there was a Black Lives Matter panel with, philosophers of color, especially talking about how we can make some real systemic changes. And they're putting out real proposals for within the field. All right. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, all I could think is, where do I have some sort of influence to make change? And within that, what is it that I can do? Teaching is just one aspect of being a professor. So, in the classroom, I could impact students with the kind of readings that I pick, the kind of topics that are discussed, the way I manage the discussions and who I give a voice to, a platform for. Like those are ways to influence within a classroom. But I think I'm seeing more and more when I think about real lasting change beyond the immediate with those students is I think about PCC itself. How can we as a community change up the way that we do things, the policies, the hiring process, right? One of the big ways I think that faculty have a great deal of influence in bringing about justice is how we hire, how we advertise these positions, who we reach out to, who we try to bring in to this community. So, those are all, I mean, there's a lot of different roles, hats that I take on throughout the day. And I just think, in every single one of these roles, all I think is, like, what can we do to progress this society a little bit more, to make it a little bit more just, to give the people who have been oppressed something to stand on, to give everyone an equal shot, a real equal shot at becoming the best versions of themselves. And not just like in talk, not just, by throwing a few handouts, but by creating some real lasting changes by the way we operate as a society.
Thank you, Albert. So Beth, would you like to reflect a little bit on, gosh, I can't remember even how I phrased it. It's going fast there, and Albert has given me so much to think about. But I think we're looking at kind of what you bring based on your background to the field, what social justice means to you, and then how you enact it in your practice.
Yeah. And I feel like Albert's response, it sounds like we're, all very like-minded, I think, from, knowing the other people on the panel as well. So social justice to me is about, naming and identifying systems of oppression, and then really working actively to try to, as a community or as a society, do a part towards dismantling that. And, I think one thing for me, as I think about it, is, of course, we're very much a capitalist society, country. And so a big part of social justice really has to do with wealth redistribution, right? And like in equitable wealth distribution. And, in particular to communities of color. And so one thing that I think about in terms of my role is that at a community college where, where education is more affordable than going straight into a 4-year, it's for many reasons, there are fewer barriers, right, for students to start at community college and then transfer somewhere than to sometimes go straight into like a 4-year school. I see that kind of being part of the an open sort of access to education as being part of working towards inequitable wealth distribution, because of course a big part of people being able to get jobs that they want to get, that pay well, and that they can support themselves, their family members, and maybe, you know, be back in their communities that they came from, has to do with education still. And so I think that's where I see myself as a community college teacher coming into play. And I just always found it more meaningful when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my time, you know, in my career. I was more excited about getting to work with students that I was more likely to be working with students who were first in their family to go to college, who maybe came from lower socioeconomic statuses, because I just felt like potentially the impact I could have as somebody who, you know, I'm a big follower of Paulo Freire, the author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and, you know, so really subscribe to his belief of education as a practice of liberation and freedom, and, you know, kind of using education to try to stimulate critical thinking in order to fight back against systems of oppression. And so I saw that potentially teaching in community college, I would be able to sort of introduce this idea to students who maybe haven't had teachers that encourage that kind of critical thinking or that kind of questioning of the system that we currently live in. And so I think that's how I see myself kind of coming into play in social justice. And also, like Albert said, you know, in the texts that I choose, in the assignments that I ask my students to do, I try to really choose things that I think are going to be meaningful, that aren't going to be an assignment or a task for the sake of doing a task, but you know, asking students to do things that I think will be meaningful and helpful to them long term. I hope to have the kind of impact that some of the professors I had that really changed, you know, opened my mind, had on me. So I think that's what I try to bring into my classroom.
Thank you so much, Beth. And Lindsay, would you please reflect a little bit on the same sort of your background, what social justice means to you, and how you put it into practice in your classroom?
It's a hard one. I have a lot to say. I'll try to keep it succinct. I think Albert said a lot of what needs to be said. And I just want to say that, you know, Albert, if you look at our panel today, I mean, I love that. This is so, yes, I know, we're glaringly white. I mean, look at this. Albert, you know, it's like the one voice. I think that we can see right now, even in just this, that we have a problem, right? We need more representation. We need more voices, people of color, Black, Indigenous, you know, we need more of that. And so, you know, I recognize the hypocrisy of a white person saying this, you know, I do, I get that. But at the same time, I think that that's part of what we need to look at and examine. What Albert and what Beth both mentioned is that from a pedagogical perspective, what are we having our students read, right? Being very clear about our goals in our book selections, our writing assignments, the ways that we have our students reflect on the world around them. In a research paper that we do in English 1A, for example, you know, our students have to do research to explore deeply a concept. And so, you know, in my classes, I make that socially relevant. It's connected to justice. It's connected to better understanding the systems that we are a part of. But I also make sure that I center other voices. You know, all my texts are, you know, not white. I actually have students here in this right now watching. And so, I mean, if you want to chat and, you know, they know what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, pushing past comfort boundaries, listening to each other, really listening to each other, right? Hearing, empathizing, creating a brave space, not a safe space, but a brave space where we can explore, you know, the problems in hiring. And it's not just in the classroom, right? I'm actually on academic senate. And so as a faculty, you know, I recognize the importance of my voice in making policy at PCC. And just yesterday, we had a vote on something that was related to something that we were doing. I don't want to get into it, but something we were doing in the meeting that was causing harm to our Black community. And so, you know, it's like we're actively responding, we're listening, we're doing research. And in English and you know, a lot of the liberal arts, you're also looking at the historical context to better understand our world and how we got here. And looking at, like Beth said, how capitalism and white supremacy go hand in hand, and to have those conversations. And so, you know, I just think that we always need to ask ourselves, and this is what Albert said, what can I do? What can I do? Even, you know, as a professor, what can I do? As a student, what can I do? I always encourage my students to, you know, don't just regurgitate what I tell you, you know, pursue your own passions, right? Educate yourself and then put that out into the world, develop your voice. So, you know, I think that that's just the way that's what it means to me. It's baked into the pedagogy, the curriculum, you know, what we're learning, how we're discussing, and actually making changes, real life changes. So I'm sure there's more, but I'm like I said, I'm trying to keep it kind of succinct.
No, thank you for that, Lindsay. I will say, like, I think we all have a very similar perspective in that our role in education is to sort of question the dominant narratives, like the narratives that are privileged in higher education, especially. You know, it's a structure that reinforces white ideals, white voices, white supremacy, and that's something that we, I think, all are working diligently to push against. You know, you bring up what you teach, whose voices you all are actively privileging in your classrooms, from the readings that you're doing, the authors you bring in, the way that students' voices are heard. We see white supremacy everywhere in the curriculum, in evaluation, in assignments. So a lot of our work, I think we could all agree, is in looking at those, questioning those narratives, questioning what we're privileging, and trying to sort of break those barriers that exist down and reinforce this idea that diversity and inclusivity, those are the things that we need to really be reinforcing. And it's complicated and hard work, but important work. And I just want to throw out bell hooks also, if you want to read about education as a practice of freedom, definitely check out bell hooks. So we're at 1:42. I do want to leave a little bit of time if there are questions from any of our attendees, if you want to go ahead and put those into the chat box so we can get to them. As we do, Albert, you brought up a little bit of like like educational sort of requirements there were in terms of how long it took you to go to school and things like that. So I wonder if everyone could just share a teensy bit about sort of what's required in terms of education and professional development for your particular career and role on campus. So Albert, we'll start with you. We'll go to Lindsay, then we'll go to Beth.
Let's see. So there's like the official requirement and then the unspoken requirement. It'll vary from field to field. It depends on what kind of thing you want to teach, I think. In philosophy, because it's so competitive, that, you know, nowadays, like a master's degree is just not going to go very far. You need to actually get a PhD, which is a big commitment. On average, it takes 6 to 7 years in philosophy to complete a PhD. And along that time, you're probably going to be teaching to make ends meet. They're probably going to give you some kind of teaching assignment. So you gain some experience there. But, you know, when I think about my own development into the position that I have, you know, a lot of the training and stuff happened, you know, from jobs. I was teaching SATs in the summers, and I learned a lot about how to manage classrooms in that kind of setting. So, you know, I think, you know, the education part of it is just like you just need to get it to even qualify or to be considered. And to figure out exactly how far you need to go, I think you need to look at each field. Generally, you know, what I find is that fields where I think a lot of people are pursuing some kind of teaching position or a professor position somewhere, those are ones going to be that are ones that are extremely competitive. So you're going to have to probably go a little further. I don't know if that helps too much, but yeah.
Thanks, Albert. Okay, Beth, Lindsay, what are, in terms of your career, what would you say the educational requirements or professional development requirements for your role?
So to teach at a community college, you need a master's degree, and I think it's different, right, Albert? Like you said, it depends on the field. So some fields require it, expect it. Others, it's encouraged but not required. A PhD or an EDD, their time commitments and financial commitments. But the point is that there's a payoff, right? I mean, it's just an extension of undergraduate. So I mean, it's a quest to improve. Now, let me just share something with you. I've been in school for a very long time, and I'm going to go back and spend even more time and money. Compared to me, my partner got an art degree, and he makes more money than I do. So let me just say that right now. There's no guarantee that the longer you're in school and the higher the degree you get, the more money you're going to make. So I think that that's part of, I was at the doing good versus doing well this morning, if anybody else attended that. And I think you have to do both for yourself, right? You have to do well in order to do good. So where do you want to make that difference? And so, if you want to teach K-12, that's another option as well to get a credential. But I think it definitely helps to talk to people who are currently in the field to see, what are the options? Where are the jobs? And to put the energy into that. It was not easy. It's a very competitive field. I'm still so grateful for getting this full-time position, and that was a decade ago. I mean, it's not easy, but if it's something that you're passionate about and you're effective at, you're going to succeed. You're going to have opportunities. There will always be growth. So I think that, if you're looking at it in terms of, money and years, it's an investment. It is, but where do you want to go? I think it's goals. What do you want to do? So.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. And Beth, would you just let us know a little bit in terms of educational, professional requirements that you think sort of align with your position?
Yeah, so in terms of teaching at PCC, of course, like everyone else has said, like the kind of minimum educational requirement tends to be a master's degree. I will say that on the job applications for community college jobs, they say or equivalent experience. And so there's also, this idea that you might have gotten equivalent work experience potentially, I think. But I did, get my master's to do that. And, I also did a lot of professional development in terms of going to different conferences. I've worked with the Puente program at the community college level and in their state office. And that was really helpful for me because that's a program that primarily works with students who are first generation, lower income, and often Latina, Latinx. And that gave me a great training, great professional development that has been very helpful for me to become a better teacher. Many of the principles of the Puente program I enact in my classes. So that was something that I didn't have to do, but I found it very helpful and useful to me as well. So yeah. Stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I think one last thing to really emphasize is obviously, you don't have to go into education with an English degree, with a degree in liberal arts, but it is certainly one of many very fulfilling roles to play, and one that really can bring you directly into a space where you can enact change and you can have an impact on people's lives. So it's certainly something to think about. But we do have our wonderful Anna Davis here who works in administration and who just wanted to make the little note that, sometimes finding ways to make change means looking at the alternatives. So being involved in education doesn't mean just teaching. It can also mean being in administration, being classified staff, and being part of the whole picture on campus. So I just wanted to make that note also. And You know, like everyone said, the educational requirements, if you are interested in teaching, the minimum is usually a master's. But it is really important to be engaged in professional development in any stage of your educational career. So as students, you have great opportunities to be part of like the Associated Students or Student Senate. You can be a leader of a club. You can attend student conferences. You're already doing that right now by being here. You can be members of panels. Like there are all sorts of things you can do to really engage in the sort of professional development that later on in life, people will sort of be looking for. So being involved in the community, you know, we work at a community college. To get hired at a community college, the emphasis really is on what are you doing for the community? It's not just what's your degree in, what was your thesis topic? It's okay, but what are you doing to give back to the students and to the people that you're serving? So thinking about it that way and bearing those things in mind might be useful to you. And you know, we're at 1:50, so we have a little bit of time if anybody has questions. And the survey link is in our chat, so you'll be able to do that. Oh, great. Nina, thank you. So how has the current administration affected your ideas of teaching? Has it validated the importance of your ideas of social justice even further? Or, that's a great question.
Yes.
There's a, lot of like, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be crass, but I think there were lots of like, holy shit moments like for all of us where it's like, what do we do now? Oh gosh, I hear a voice.
Nina. Sorry, I was afraid to ask the question for a long while, and then at the very end, I decided, well, you know what? I got to do the brave, however you said it.
Brave, Nina, brave space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys would like be offended, but I mean,
no. These are the questions we have to ask.
Right.
Yeah.
It's huge. No pun intended. It is. Yeah. Okay, I'll get off the mute.
Well, thank you so much, Nina. Let's hear from some of our folks. So Lindsay, Beth, Albert, let's start with you. How has the current administration affected your ideas of teaching?
You know, I think that you've probably heard teachers say that like they're not supposed to maybe disclose their political beliefs or like be political. They're sort of supposed to be apolitical so as not to be exclusionary, which of course we want to keep our classes places where the students feel generally welcome, right? And able to show up there. I will say that certain things that our current administration has done has made me feel like this isn't really a political issue. This is an issue of like human decency, and I can't be apolitical, or that is to be complicit. And so, so I think it certainly has made me, it's made me not just in my teaching, but in my everyday life. And many of you may have found this too. It's just made me generally more politically aware and active, because I am truly concerned about many things, including just like democracy being able to still be the way that our government functions. So so it's completely influenced me in every aspect of my life, including my teaching. And, I think it's also like, I think to the point that Lindsay brought up about like brave space versus safe space, we want our students to be able to show up in our classes and be heard. And yet we don't want to condone bigotry or be complicit in something like that. So that also can be seen as political, right? But again, to me, that's just an issue of like being a decent human being, to not allow bigotry or hate speech or disrespect of somebody's identity in my classes. So that's seen as political, but to me, it's not really, it is and it isn't. It just seems normal to me, but I think that is now a political position. So.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. Albert, would you sort of reflect on the same question?
Yeah, so honestly, I think it depends on exactly who you're working with, who your administrator, the ones that you are directly working for. I know that at least in social sciences, dean, also the president, I've sensed a great deal of support for addressing issues of social justice, and really not just like in word, but in terms of deed, in terms of the professional development stuff that is offered for faculty. Um, oh, and um, I think I don't know if this is true. I just know that each person's experience in terms of the level of support they get from administration varies depending on who they're working with. And I think that's part of the reason I said that one of the places that you can have a great deal of voice is in the hiring process. And that's whether at PCC or any job that you have, if you are in a position of power to be able to hire, who you hire impacts the kind of culture that you have at the place and what the group is and the community is really about. So I think we've made some good hires, and I'm hoping that, unfortunately, it's something that you just kind of constantly be plugging away at. If you know anything about the history of social justice movements, it's a constant battle, and you try to make changes where you can, as much as you can. So. Yeah, but so far, I don't know. For me personally, I haven't sensed anything but support, which has been nice.
Thank you. Albert, I think it was great that you focused on like the administration on campus, because it is important to consider the way that leadership of any kind, whether it's like the US government's leadership or the PCC community leadership, is influencing what we're able to do in our classroom and what we're feeling comfortable with. So Beth, I loved your answer. Albert, I loved your answer. And Lindsay, let's hear a little bit from you.
I'll be quick.
I know take it in either direction.
Yeah, I know we don't have a lot of time. I know, so I have always discussed issues of equity, but the way in which I've discussed it has changed over the past few years. I think that, like what Beth had said about, as instructors, we want to encourage all voices to be heard and respected. And we recognize that everybody comes to the classroom with different experiences and perspectives, and that's important. But at the same time, there is a line between opinion and human rights. And so when we're talking about, making changes in our world about things that matter, we have to have these conversations. And I think that this administration, I used to talk more about the actual president. I used to talk about 45 more. I've stopped talking about him as much because it's not, he's a symbol. Right. The problem is not just that one individual. And so I try to not say, this person or that person, but I do look at administrative policies and laws that affect people of color, marginalized populations. So how you can't really not go there, right, in having this conversation. So whenever people want to, share their own perspectives, I encourage that, but I also want support. So if a student disagrees with me, which I encourage, I don't know everything. I hope I've made that clear. As long as there's support, and that's what I'm trying to teach, right? And that's what we're all trying to teach, right? Is back up your ideas, find the evidence, use your rhetorical skills to convince. And so I think as long as we're teaching those skills, that's our goal. But it is tied in it, and I do address it, and I'm unapologetic about it. I have a Black Lives Matter section on my syllabus. I have a land acknowledgement on my syllabus. I have an undocumented student resources section on my syllabus. I mean, I think it's incredibly important just to have that be, like I said, unapologetic. This is what we're talking about, and I want your opinions, but let's discuss it honestly, openly, and with evidence. And science.
Yeah,
science.
Yes, definitely science. It's real. Okay, thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you especially to our attendees. We would not be here doing this without you. This is, why we're here. If you would like to contact me, I've put my email address in the chat because I know there's a lot of information to take in today, so I'd be happy to continue a conversation. If any of our other panelists want to do that, please feel free to put your info in the chat, but obviously no pressure. And thank you so much, panelists, for your insights and your feedback, and thank you to our attendees for being awesome. We appreciate you coming. So that's it from me. I'll leave it open so you can still see the chat for a couple of minutes, and then we'll close it out. So thanks so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.